Dear Great Assembly, why are there so many disciples in the Buddha Sangha adopting ascetic practices which are called the Thanga?
lại có rất nhiều những vị đệ tử tu hành khổ hạnh mà mình gọi là đầu đà.
The word Thanga is also known as Dutta. It is called Dutta in Sanskrit, which means ascetic practices.
Đầu tàu nghĩa là pháp tu khổ hạnh.
In the Buddha Sangha, there were many monks who vowed to adopt ascetic practices, and the Buddha also praised this virtue. Thus, this kind of asceticism, Dutta, must be different from the other kind of asceticism, Duskara, Karya, criticized by the Buddha before. This asceticism, Dutta, is not extreme.
Nó không phải là thái quá.
Dear Great Assembly, when it comes to asceticism, Dutta, it consists of these 13 ascetic practices. I should say that practicing Dutta means practicing these 13 ascetic practices. It's called 13 ascetic practices, Dutta.
Người ta gọi là 13 pháp đầu đà. 13 pháp đầu đà. Thứ
The
nhất,
first practice is wearing abandoned robes.
mặc y phấn tảo.
The abandoned robes are made of cast-off clothes or rags, picked up from cemeteries, hospitals, roads, forests, etc.
Đường, rừng, vân vân.
They are abandoned and no longer used. They may be pieces of cloth left after being either used for wrapping corpses, burned, and thrown away, or dragged by dogs or birds. Then they can be brought together, washed, and sewn together to make the robes. That is the first ascetic practice of wearing the abandoned robes. Ascetics do not receive the robes offered by almsgivers. They pick these pieces of cloth up by themselves, so they are not dependent on the almsgivers. In the past, a piece of cloth was so precious and rare. It was so precious to be offered a piece of cloth. If a monk is fond of beautiful fabrics and robes, he may be dependent on the almsgivers when they offer him a beautiful fabric. The almsgivers may ask the monk to help them or do something in return for their offerings. You get this?
Con không cúng y cho thầy đâu. Nghe.
That's how the monk hereby becomes dependent and attached. Therefore, by wearing abandoned robes, monks can put an end to their dependence on robes. The second ascetic practice is wearing only a 3-piece robe. Likewise, the Sangha of our pagoda currently wear only a 3-piece robe. The largest outer piece is donned outside, covering an upper piece and a pair of cloth pants. In this practice, they are called the upper cloth, the middle cloth, and the inner cloth. In a lifetime, an ascetic only has a triple robe. Only when a monk's robe is completely worn out can he have a new robe sewn. Great Assembly, unlike you who may have dozens of clothes in your wardrobe, every monk only has a triple robe. Ascetics only have a triple robe, no more. They wear only a triple robe throughout their lifetime. Only when their robes are so badly torn that they cannot be mended and worn anymore, and ascetics have a new one sewn. The third ascetic practice is only growing an arm's round for survival, which means ascetics must hold their bowls an arm's round for survival. Monks are not allowed to wait for lay people to invite them to their home to offer food, but they must hold their bowls and go on arms round for survival. This is the third practice. The fourth is going arms round sequentially. Going arms round, ascetics sequentially go to each house without skipping any houses. They cannot choose the rich or those who offer delicious food and ignore the poor when going arms round. They must go sequentially from house to house, one by one. It is a virtue of ascetic practitioners. The fifth ascetic practice is 1 meal a day. 1 meal a day means sitting to eat once a day and not eating any more after finishing and getting up. Even if anyone offers ascetics more food after that, they are not allowed to eat more. This is called 1 meal a day. The The sixth ascetic practice is eating in alms bowls, as the Sangha of our pagoda do. The Sangha of Baba Pagoda are eating in alms bowls. The seventh ascetic practice is not to reserve food. After finishing eating, even if there are leftovers or someone offers more alms, ascetics are not allowed to reserve food for tomorrow. The eighth ascetic practice is dwelling in the forest. So, one of the ascetic practices is dwelling in the forest. The Sangha of our pagoda are also practicing the virtue of dwelling in the forest. The ninth ascetic practice is dwelling under trees, right? Performing routines and sleeping under trees are also what the Sangha of our pagoda are practicing. For the 10th ascetic practice, ascetics completely stay outdoors instead of staying under trees. The 11th ascetic practice is dwelling at the cemetery, where there are tombs or places for cremation. The 12th ascetic practice is resting anywhere without selection, so being adaptive, right? No matter it is a bale of straw or stubble, a tree root, or even a buffalo shed, for example, monks should be so adaptive that they can sleep anywhere without any demands. The 13th ascetic practice is so challenging, which is not lying, or in other words, not sleeping. This means ascetics only walk, stand, sit. Since being engaged in the ascetic practice of not lying, monks will not lie. Dear Great Assembly, those are 13 ascetic practices. Certainly, one who vows to adopt ascetic practices can choose some or all of their virtues. They is still considered as the one practicing ascetic practices, no matter what. You can see that those 13 ascetic practices are so challenging, they are so hard to perform, and they are also arduous, right? They are really arduous. Dear Great Assembly, the world's honored one highly praised monks who vow to adopt ascetic practices, right? He commended one of his 10 greatest disciples, Mahakashyapa, for being the foremost disciple adopting ascetic practices. Mahakashyapa may be over 20 years older than the Buddha.
Chắc không phải hơn Đức Phật phải đến hơn 20 tuổi.
Because after the Buddha had entered nirvana for decades, Mahakashyapa passed away at the age of 120. Sariputra is also the one adopting ascetic practices. And, dear Great Assembly, in Vietnam, the Buddhist king Chan Nhan Thong was also engaged in ascetic practices when he was ordained. So, he has the title of Huong Van, the Great Ascetic.